I seem to somehow have messed up filming this first one, so I'll do it again, but I'm using the annotations I've already done. Um, in the first lesson, we talked about the love test, which is definitely the central action of 1-1. And you've got to know 1-1 backwards and forwards because all the themes, the language, the characters, it sets up the whole play. It's by far the most important part. I began by focusing on Lear's division of the map and setting up the love test, and I've edited those scenes to focus on that. But actually, the play does open with what A.C. Bradley, I think, coined as the subplot, or other people would call the mirror plot, or the double plot. The story of Gloucester, his bastard son Edmund, and his legitimate son Edgar, and how the bastard Edmund betrays Gloucester and leads to his being tortured psychologically, physically. His eyes get plucked out on stage. He endures the most horrific torture of any character in the play. And it's difficult, actually, to think of it as a subplot in some ways. And that's something, in terms of AO2 structure, you might want to put pressure on. This was also a story not in the original Lear of 1594. Shakespeare, in his reading of Marvell and Sidney, added this story and made it a counterpoint, I think, to the main narrative of a father who feels betrayed by his daughters and goes into a kind of madness. It's a counterpoint. So the play opens with Kent and Gloucester gossiping about who Lear likes most to marry Cordelia. Is it going to be France or Burgundy? And in the process of just this normal court gossip, Kent meets Edmund for the first time, and he says, "Oh, is this your son?" And I've slimmed down the scene to focus on this meeting. Is this your son? And Gloucester, this character who excites such terrible pity and pain in the audience over the course of this play, who's seen as this terribly brutalized, honest, genuine figure, here is quite grotesque and sexual and bawdy and demeaning to his bastard son, who he refers to as whoreson. And once again, I think Shakespeare's doing this to destabilize our understanding of characters, to suggest a much more complex world that we live in. That Gloucester isn't simply a victim, he isn't simply a one-dimensional character. But I think this scene isn't thought about enough in that way. But if you look at his language, it's filled with sexual punning. So, is this your son? His breeding, sir, hath been at my charge. I've so often blushed to acknowledge him. So breeding could refer to education or raising, but it's a pun that also is, in terms of animals, and animals indeed, copulation for reproduction, breeding. I breed my animals, my herds. And I was in charge of that. And so there's a joke, there's a kind of elbow there, right? Old guys making jokes about having sex. And I was embarrassed to acknowledge him. I had a bastard. I didn't want to say he was mine. And you'll see that echo later in the speech. And Kent, rather innocently, I don't think with meaning, drops the phrase, "I cannot conceive you. I don't get what you're saying." But conceive, again, has that other meaning, like conceive a child. And Gloucester goes for that pun again. That pun, he's all full of sexual puns. He goes, "Oh yeah, but her mother could. Where she grew round wound, huh? You know what I'm talking about? And she had a son for her cradle, even though she didn't have a husband. Do you smell a problem? Huh? Do you smell a fault? Yucca. Yucca, yucca, yucca." Jokes, jokes, jokes. Not very funny jokes. Really inappropriate jokes. Really low body humor to begin a play called The Tragedy of King Lear. That's beginning in a court, in the most formal of settings, where we're going to hear these completely ridiculous lies told by these women about how much they love their father, but in very high register of language. We begin with this grotesque sexual punnery. Kent, being a nice guy, says, "Oh, look, it was a mistake, but I don't want it undone." I love this, again, this prefix "un" that goes throughout the play. Shakespeare's having a lot of fun with it, like a chemist putting compounds together. He's putting words together to get new things. Look, it was a mistake. It was a fault. But I don't want it undone because the guy looks so proper. He looks great. That's a problem. Edmund looks good. He looks proper. He looks well-educated. He is an evil, horrible person. What occurs in the play. But he looks so proper. And Gloucester comes back. He says, look, I do have a legal son, a little bit older than this. I love them both. But this knave, this fool, sexual language, saucily. He came saucily into the world before he was sent for. But his mother was beautiful. And then he says something. There was good sport in her making. Please forgive. It was like, I really enjoyed screwing her. It's a kind of what he's saying in a pretty rough way. And the whoreson must be acknowledged. I blushed at acknowledging him. He's the son of a whore, and I have to acknowledge him. That's rough. That's a rough thing to say. Must. Whoreson. And then he turns to Edmund and says, do you know this guy, okay? Remember who he is, Kent. He's Kent. You've got to learn. He's teaching him all the members of the court. Now, you've got to remember, what I've tried to emphasize with you, my students, is Edmund is standing here for this whole speech. He's listening. He's probably had to listen to this a number of times. And I don't know what he's feeling, because he reveals nothing. But I can only imagine the chaos, the depravity, the anger, the rage that lives behind the eyes. But he's careful. And he's controlled. Absolutely. Edmund is like a chess player. So tight. No, my lord. I don't know him. But I shall study deserving. I'm going to learn him. And that's absolutely Edmund. He studies. He learns. He observes. He mimics. He blends. He adapts. He forges his brother's handwriting perfectly. He knows how to play people. He can read people. He cozies up to them. He seduces them. He studies them. So, just in a few lines, we get a destabilization of the character of Gloucester, a confirmation of Kent, the introduction of Edmund, and thought processes already of how Edmund is played in this first scene versus the other. AO2 structure, we have the subplot or the mirror plot, depending on how you see it, and this is the true beginning of the play. And the way I've taught it, I've introduced the love test first, because it is the central action. But what you might want to consider is, why start the play with this and not the love test? In different productions, they move these scenes as they see fit.